Hey kids, my name's Warren, but you better refer to me as Dusty. Today we're going to be dealing with this bootleg TR-6 WONDWART made by our good friends, a Chinese company named FENG, which may or may not be a shell company made in order for the main company to avoid taking direct responsibility for selling bootleg P-Bandai kits.
That's a nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Now you might be surprised to see that the parts were already separated from their sprues, but let me explain. To be honest, this video was actually meant to be a full build video, complete with the parts assembly, but due to hardware issues at the time, all those video footage I gathered pretty much went up in flames. However, during the time of its eventual erasure, the build was deemed incomplete still by yours truly, so the show must go on. And so we start by showing you the complete kit, and then I turned it into a paraplegic by dismantling it to make it a little bit easier to work with. Then I started sanding all the nubs and mold lines that were left in the kit, like how the current US administration is getting rid of their undesirables. For legal reasons, I'm supposed to elaborate that this is a joke. Fun fact, the original footage of this was over half an hour long, so in order to not bore you, I decided to cut almost the entire footage and then sped up the rest because I value your time, and definitely not because of your short attention spans.
Are we done yet?
No. Finally. Now that that's done, we now move on into painting the specific pieces in the correct color. We start by masking it to ensure that paint doesn't just seep into the parts where we don't want them to be. Not that it mattered in any shape or form. In the meantime, why not consider liking the video and clicking that subscribe button? It would greatly help my endeavors into content creation and allow my channel to grow. And now we move on to painting a layer of primer, by hand because that's what I'm more familiar with. To better adhere the paint to the surface of the plastic, just pretend I did the same for the other parts. Then I prepare this newly bought paint set to be originally used for airbrushing, but due to my inexperience, that had to be shelved for the time being. You'll see why in a minute. And as you can see, I tried to make a mix between blue and violet to mimic the purple used in the kit. I then made an absolute blunder. I tried using a bit of paint thinner to dilute the mixture, thinking that nothing bad would happen. However, this naive thought would bite me in the backside and cause me to ruin the concoction, leaving behind this weird sludge, which I promptly threw away. Now for the most anticipated part of the video, I assemble this dinky little airbrush I bought for $4 minimum, thinking to myself that I'm ready, that the prior testing proves it could work. How difficult could it be? Oh, how wrong I was. Starting off, the airbrush trigger refused to cooperate half the time, as if saying I wasn't truly ready to take on such responsibility, yet I stubbornly went ahead with it. But I got tired of it and was forced to once again paint it by hand. What happened? You may ask, well, remember when I said something along the lines of using thinner to dilute paint? Well, instead of repeating that mistake, I simply opted out to using water instead, unaware of what it will do to the masking tape. And the result is, as you can see. So instead of dilly-dallying, I immediately bust out the acetone to remove the excess paint that managed to penetrate into the plastic surface. But I did it in such a rigorous manner that I ended up accidentally removing a tiny sliver of the actual paintwork. And instead of trying to fix it, I simply decided to leave it like that because I didn't feel like going through all that trouble again. Moving on, I decided to replace this busted up polycap on the waist joint for a change of pace. Bam, done. Now we move on to the waterslide decals, because it felt like the kit was a bit lacking when it comes to details, even though it wasn't the most conventional of gunpla design to ever exist, not accounting for the unusual design choices that are immediately noticeable. And just to prove I didn't learn a single thing about using defective airbrush, here I am using it to gloss coat all these individual parts. You can't see it, but I struggled a lot in this footage as I was repeatedly dismantling and reassembling my airbrush to get an accurate diagnosis on the problem, because apparently after my failed attempt at applying paint with it, the leftovers that eluded me managed to clog up the spray multiple times throughout this entire procedure. It worked out in the end, but the repeated visits into the toilet leaves a lot to be desired. Moving on, we finally get to the eventual gunpla assembly. I'm sure they all are happy to see each other again after a long time. I lay them down as I was contemplating whether all of this was worth it, but I have no time for that, so I decided to move forward. I first started by attaching the legs back into the drum frame, then connected this thick butt flap in its behind. Then I went for this massive long beam rifle because it required less parts assembly. I then remembered the side armor that was supposed to go into the leg, so I first did it on the right side, then the left. Oh shit. And then I secured both leg armor on the left side so that it doesn't fall off randomly, because that's the last thing I want to happen right now. Now I reattached the arm components into each other and then proceeded to reattach them both onto the torso. Once that was done, we move on to the final part, reuniting the upper and lower frame, finally completing this kit. Here it is in all its glory. Took me a bit of time, a lot of time, but I believe it was all worth it if you couldn't tell already. This was the first time I did all of these things on camera. But enough of that, let's move on to the actual kit. Now, I don't think I could give this thing any rating of sorts, even if I think it deserves it, because of the mere undeniable fact of it being a bootleg, and I don't want Bandai to put me down while I'm still at the start of my career. But in my opinion, this is a nice kit to have on display, the articulation is all right, and the only real issue I have is the polycaps, which is made of soft plastic, which makes it deteriorate faster. So in summation, this was a very unique plastic model, all things considered, though I won't recommend this for beginners, due to the handful of issues that plagues it, simply because it's a copy of an old premium Bandai kit from 5 years ago, and the unique shape it has doesn't help it either. So if you're new to this hobby, I recommend you get a more standard HG kit, or you could also consider one of those entry-grade kits. However, if you're one of those advanced of Zeta enthusiasts and/or are an experienced builder looking for an interesting model kit to have your grubby little hands on, then I could see this being worth your time and money. Don't quote me on that, though. So that's all you'll get from me today. See you next time. Goodbye.